When I was 16, my friend had told me one of her boyfriend's friends liked me. I asked which one, and she said Austin. I said that I would be okay with her giving him my number. She did, and a week later, he became my boyfriend. There was nothing out of the ordinary at first. He seemed like a nice guy, and I felt like I could trust him. Fast forward to a week later, I was at his house, and he wanted to make out with me. I said no because we were in the middle of a video game. He got mad at me and started to have a meltdown. He dragged me upstairs by my hair, and I couldn't fight him. Once upstairs, he began to abuse me. I was scared and didn't know what to do. I kept getting abused for a year and a half because I was too scared to leave. Finally I did, and then I found out some pretty weird stuff about him. I had heard from a friend of his back from his hometown that he had planted a bomb in his school and then tried to light himself on fire. Plus, he had been institutionalized more than once. Okay, major red flags, and I wish I would have known that a lot sooner. I graduated high school early, and then moved out of town and started going to college. I had Austin blocked from everything. Phone, Facebook, Twitter, basically any social media site he was on, I blocked him. Not even a month into college, I kept getting these calls and texts from numbers I didn't know. It was him. I had to constantly block numbers. I was getting tired of it, so I answered one. He was asking which dorm I lived in because he was on campus and wanted to see me. I threatened to get security and the police if he did not leave. He hung up. I had gone home that weekend, and then there was a knock on the door. I answered it, and it was him. He was holding a coffee cup and smiling at me. He tried handing me the coffee and told me it was my favorite kind. He was right. It was my regular order at the local coffee shop. I asked him how he knew that, and he confessed that he'd been watching me when I go there. I quickly shut the door and called the police and told him what I was doing. He left, but when I went back outside, the coffee cup was right next to my car. The thing is, I don't know how he got my address. None of my friends ever gave it to him, and I sure as hell did not. Fast forward to right before my 18th birthday, I was in a musical at my college, and I had been advertising it on my Facebook, so friends and family knew when it was. After our Saturday show, I had gotten a text from an unknown number that said, "Thanks for making me laugh. You did really good tonight. A-." I lost it. I showed one of the girls in the show with me, and she got security to walk me back to my dorm. A few weeks later, I found out that he had bought me birthday presents and wanted me to come get them from his house. I told him no, and he kept bothering me about it. Yet again, he ended up showing up at my house when I was home. It was about 11:30 at night, and I heard tapping noises at the window. I thought it was the wind making a branch hit the window, so I thought nothing of it. Probably about 10 minutes later, I heard whispering outside. I opened my blinds, and he was standing there. I froze and shut the blinds. I called the police again, and when I got off the phone, went back to the window and told him the police were coming, and that if I ever saw him again, I would get a restraining order. To this day, that was the last time I saw him. So Austin, let's never meet again. This story takes place, I'd say 2009 to sometime in 2010. He isn't actually my ex, but at the time, he was in a relationship with my best friend. Things were fine at first. They talked on the phone a lot, as well as us hanging out in one big group pretty often. I was seeing one of his friends at the time, and we weren't really into the hanging out alone stages yet, so mostly we would just all hang out together. There were a lot of good memories from that time, but it was around the point that we started to drift off into the more alone time and less group time. Then things started to go bad. For one, the guy always scared me. I'd never admit it, and definitely not to his face, but he was intimidating. A little while after, he and my friend started going out. He told me he was going to punch me in the face if I didn't stop looking at him, and ever since then, he'd kind of put the fear of God in me. but as much as he scared me, I hated him more. The first time he ever hit her, she called me crying her eyes out. He'd kicked her off of him into his dresser, and she didn't know what to do. But of course, as with all abusive relationships, that was hardly the end of it. Certain parts of their relationship were good, certain parts were bad, but he always swore up and down he was sorry and loved her. Somehow, he always managed to talk her into coming back, even when they did break up. Our other friends and I started to notice bruises all over her. One she'd tell us were from play fighting, but if that was really the case, he had to have been playing pretty rough with her nonetheless. When she wanted to go out and hang out with the rest of us, he'd hold her down on the ground and refuse to let her leave for hours. Eventually she'd cave in and stay with him, and he'd finally let her up. Once when we were all at his house, he punched right through a radio and scared the crap out of all of us. Another night, I had to sit there and watch the two of them nearly get into a fist fight right there on the street. When I think back to it all, I really wish I would have dropped the ruse of support a friend and told her flat out that he was scum. My disapproval was always known, but mostly stayed silent about it. It wasn't like I could change her mind anyway, but I still wish I had done more. One night, a number I didn't recognize called the house, and I picked up to find that it was him on the other line. He told me she was in the hospital because she accidentally hit her abdomen off his dresser and her spleen burst. The bullshit excuse and the tone of his voice sold out his lies pretty quick, but I didn't flat out accuse him, but everyone, nurses, doctors, her family, her friends, everyone had their suspicions. It was him. Who did it? I never confronted her, but I still knew. I just figured she'd tell me when she was ready. 6 or so months after the fact, she finally did. They'd been wrestling, he'd gotten mad, and he shoved her into the dresser. Apparently when she started screaming due to the pain, he was pretty adamant she was faking and refused to take her to the hospital until his parents intervened. To this day, he tells everybody it was a lie and that he never abused her. His whole family on his side, but as for me, I know the truth. Because for half of it, I was right there. I know what kind of person he is. I just wish the rest of the world could too. Today he's got a girlfriend, a baby girl, and another child on the way. While I'm scared for the girlfriend and the kid, I just hope the next one's a boy so he can kick his ass like he deserves. Then again, someone like that should never have kids in the first place. So, this actually happened back around 7th to my 8th grade year. Our school gave everyone mini iPads to do work on, or just play games on their free time. Considering there was a block on some sites, I'd spend my time on Pinterest or Quotive. So my friend messaged me over Quotive, telling me about this argument he got into. My friend's a bit of an asshole, so I go and check out the argument on one of his activities. I defend this person, let's call them A, and tell them to just block my friend because the argument was a bit stupid. I don't really remember what it was about. I'm going to go ahead and say I found out he lived about an hour away from my town, him being in Louisville and me being in Muldra. Later on he messaged me telling me I was a really nice person and all that. We talked for a while and nothing seemed off, but as school months went by, he seemed to get a little weird. He'd suddenly get really mad over nothing and threatened he'd kill himself. Obviously, I had started panicking over this and messaged him telling him, "No man, you have a lot to live for." About a month later, we were talking and he told me he had to go because his stepsister had killed herself. He suddenly disappeared over half my 8th grade year. Obviously, I was happy he was okay and all that. He seemed better. I ended up dating him for a while, not actually thinking anything of it. Yes, that was real stupid of me, I know. Near the end of my 8th grade year, I didn't hear from him till mid-summer. When he replied to one of my messages, I told him that I had to break up with him. He told me that he'd seriously hurt himself if I did, but I had to. I couldn't be with him any longer. I have horrible anxiety, so you can't imagine all the panic attacks I had when he suddenly got upset. Later on, he messaged me and a group of friends saying he was going to kill himself or have his dad do it. He kept saying his dad would be here soon to end his life. What made me realize he was lying is the fact that if his dad murdered his mom and almost murdered him, how would he have custody of him? It didn't make sense to me. His mother personally messaged me on DeviantArt to tell me that her son was actually her daughter who had suffered from schizophrenia and was confused about everything. She told me that his stepsister never existed. So pretty much A lied to me about everything. I confronted them about it on Quotive, and they told me if they ever saw me that they'd kill me. So I blocked them and I thought that was it. But a friend messaged me telling me that he was putting horrible messages about me all over his Quotive activity, saying I was a whore and a bitch, and I just used him. This went on for a while till he suddenly just stopped. I'm glad that it was over, and I hope to never hear from this kid again. It seriously had me on edge for a while. I moved to a large city from an island when I was 19. It was a completely new environment as I had never lived anywhere but the island my entire life. Before I moved, I had a great group of friends, mostly made up of girls I'd known since elementary school. Needless to say, I was pretty lonely, and making new friends was proving to be difficult. 4 years later, I'm 23, I had 3 friends. Not so bad, right? I decided to enroll in college and study to be a teacher. I loved my classes and started to make friends there too. I was really excited to meet new people, especially people who shared my passion for teaching and helping children. At the start of a new class, I met a girl named Julia. She complimented my outfit before class started and then proceeded to roll her eyes at everyone who spoke to her and filed her nails through the entire 5-hour class, and generally acting like she'd rather be somewhere else. This was rather off-putting, so most of us just left her alone and didn't try to speak to her. A few weeks into the class, she suddenly warmed up to me, talking to me during breaks and asking about homework assignments or to see my notes. I'm not a very judgmental person, so I just figured she was going through something, or she just was the type of person who tried to keep people at a distance. We all have our own shit, you know? We stayed friends through the next few classes, talking on the phone, going to lunch, shopping, the typical female bonding stuff. She started to open up about her breakup with her much older boyfriend, her problems with her current boyfriend, and her family. Turns out she had a pretty rough life, and I started telling the other girls in my class to be nice and try to get to know her and that she wasn't so bad. New Year's rolls around, and it turns out neither of us had plans to go out, so she invited me to her house to drink wine, eat, do our nails, and watch TV. I agree, and we made plans for her to pick me up around 5, so we could buy dinner, wine, and snacks for the evening before the streets got crowded. She pulls up to my house and texts me that she and her boyfriend James are there. He came along for the ride and was going out with some friends later that night. This was my first time meeting him. I went to get in the back seat, and he jumped out of the passenger side and told me to sit up front, which was nice. We had a good time shopping, joking around, and singing in the car. We were almost back at Julia's house when James said something. I'm not sure what, but it pissed Julia off. She turned around while driving and started yelling at him. James started yelling back, and we started swerving. I am obviously shocked and a little scared, so I say, lightly, "Hey Julia, I want to make it to next year, eyes on the road." She snaps out of her rage, laughs, apologizes, and continues driving. We get to her house, and she and James immediately start fighting. They go upstairs and close her bedroom door. I busy myself with putting the food where I think it should go and figure out how to turn on the TV, and basically just sit there for an hour while the yelling gets louder and louder. I'm thinking about who I can call to come get me, but realize that I'm stuck. All the major streets are closed, and it would take hours to get me, and it was already 9 p.m. At that moment, I hear a crash followed by cursing. I stand up and consider going upstairs when James comes running downstairs and out of the door. I run upstairs to check on Julia. She's crying. I ask what's going on, and she says he got in her face, calling her names, and she punched him. I was totally unprepared for this, so I tell her the truth. They were both wrong and they should apologize and possibly break up. Anger like that isn't healthy. She calms down and we eat, drink, and end up having a pretty good night. The next morning, James shows up with flowers for Julia and coffee for all of us, and it seems that all is well until they start fighting again. At this point, I just wanted to get home and forget about this craziness. I tell her it's getting late in the day and I need to get home for my annual family dinner. She agrees to take me home. James comes with us. He's suddenly being really rude and cold towards me, but I just chalk it up to him being in a bad mood about their fight. I finally get home and decide not to hang out with her as much. Julia dropped out of school. We still talked on the phone a lot, but rarely hung out anymore. One night she called me crying hysterically. James tried to choke her with her phone charger cord and punched her. I tell her this is not okay and she needs to break up with him. She's at his house and I tell her to call a cab or the cops and leave. I hear James in the background and the phone goes dead. I start calling and texting her back, terrified that he's hit her again, or worse. When she starts texting me, she's okay. He passed out drunk and she's scared. He hid her keys and phone and she's texting me through her iPad. I tell her again to get out of there, but she says she's too scared to leave. Finally, after almost an hour of silence, she said she called the cops. He tackled her while she was running out of the house, hit her repeatedly, and ran off once he realized she'd called 911. The next few days, the cops were looking for him. I'm assuring her that she did the right thing and she needs to stay away from him for good this time. All seems well. Julia is back in my classes. Though we don't talk as much, I think that all the drama is over. Then one night, at about 3 a.m., the cops are pounding on my door. Scared the shit out of me. They say they had a 911 call from inside my house. I freak out, my dad freaks out, and my mom slept through all of it. Anyways, the cops ask us to check our home. No one else is there, but the phone line is dead. They tell us that people can sometimes hack into the line and place false calls, but to call them if anything happens. Weird. 2 nights later, I'm in class and my phone buzzes. My mom's calling from home, which is odd because she knows I'm in class. I know she's home alone, so I go into the hall and answer. It's not my mom. The voice is distorted and it says,
I know where you live. I know your mom's alone. I'm going to kill her tonight.
I started shaking. I hung up the phone and called my mom's cell. She answers, surprised that I'm calling when I'm supposed to be in class, and asks what's wrong. I tell her to make sure all the doors are locked, get the shotgun, and call the police. Someone just called from the landline threatening to kill you. She goes to call from the landline, but it's dead. I tell her to hang up and call the police. I'll call Dad, and I'll be home as soon as I can. The home calls with the same voice and similar messages continued, but this time he starts laughing. He calls over and over while I'm frantically calling my cousin and telling her it's an emergency and I need her to come get me. The police officer calls from my mother's phone. He says no one is in the house, on the street, or in my yard. He asked me how many calls I had gotten and tells me that he'll stay until I get home. For 20 minutes while I waited for my ride, I got 15 calls, all from home, same voice telling me that I'm going to die, my mom's going to die, my dad's going to come home and find our corpses. I can't even explain how scared I was at that moment. Then I got mad, really, really mad. The next time he called, I started screaming at him, "Come get me, motherfucker. I'll leave my fucking door unlocked. You think you can kill me? Threaten my family? Fucking do it and I'll fucking fill you with bullets, you little bitch. Hiding your voice and your number. I'll fucking end you, you little shit. I'm not scared of you." The line goes dead. I'm shaking and crying as my cousin pulls up. I fill her in, and she asks who the hell would be doing this to me. I don't have enemies. People usually really like me. Then it clicks. James. Julia had told me that he still had her phone and iPad. James used to call her from random numbers of her friends when they were fighting, and she wouldn't answer his calls. James threatened to kill her mother and her dog. We get to my house and I tell the cop I know who's calling. I give him a full name and directions to his house. While I'm standing there, I get another call from my house. The cop answers for me, calls him by his name, tells him that he is a police officer and he needs to stop harassing me. The line goes dead and I don't get another call all that night. I sat in the living room until dawn with my shotgun loaded, waiting. My dad came home the next day. We go and fill out a complaint at the police station. Turns out James is on probation. I call Julia and tell her everything, crying about how scared I was. She got angry and said that James didn't do anything, yelling that I'm making it all up and I'm jealous of their love and I'm bitter and alone. Turns out they're back together. I hung up on her and changed my number, called my school and requested to be transferred to a different campus. Julia emailed me saying that she'd been trying to call and that she confronted James and he admitted that he was trying to scare me because I tried to come between them. I ignored it and I haven't heard from either since. So James, let's not meet ever again. Same goes for you, Julia. You two psychos deserve each other. Hey guys, thank you all for watching my video. I want to give a big thank you to Rachel and Cosmic Inc. for sharing their stories and letting me narrate them. And before I go on to anything else, if you're a person that's experiencing any abuse in a relationship or has, please talk to somebody before it gets any worse. I've been there before with friends, even now, that are in abusive relationships, and it's not a great thing to experience or see. And if I had to say one thing, though, guys, please talk to somebody about it, because there are people that still want you on this earth and want you living healthy and happy lives. So please talk to somebody about it, a friend or a family member, because I've experienced it in my life. I've watched friends experience it, and it's not a very nice thing. So guys, if you have anybody to talk to, please do it. But on a more lighter note, guys, I just wanted to say that we are past 800 subscribers, and I just want to give a big thank you, give a big clap to all of you guys out there. Thank you so much for subscribing and liking all my content. And I have to say, guys, if you guys have any scary stories at all, any at all, don't be afraid to submit it to my email address. I'll narrate it when I get a chance. And who knows, maybe I'll do a special video on subscriber-submitted stories for all you guys. So guys, with all that being said, I just want to give a big thank you to everybody for subscribing yet again, because it's pretty awesome that you guys like my videos a lot. And with all that being said, guys, thank you all for watching, and just remember, the best ideas always come out of nightmares.